Hi, I'm Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. He's a US Today best-selling author and the author of the latest novel, A Scandalous Affair, no other than Mr. Leonard Goldberg. Welcome to Book 101, Mr. Leonard, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
I am a retired physician. I worked in medicine for many years. I was a clinical professor of medicine at UCLA, where I started writing, by the way, shortly before then. And then once I retired, I moved back to my home, which is an island off the coast of Charleston, South Carolina. And I continued writing. And it's here where I came up with the idea for the Daughter of Sherlock Holmes. And the novel which we're going to talk about today is the eighth in the series.
Eighth in the series, people, Mr. Leonard Goldberg. Thank you so much for sharing your talents to the world. So, in what ways does the novel explore the impact of personal scandals on public figures during the Great War?
The novel revolves around blackmail, in which one of the most powerful people in the British government is being blackmailed. And in addition to being the Chancellor of the Exchequer, which is a very powerful position in England, it's like our Secretary of Treasury, but in addition, all government spending has to go through the Chancellor of Exchequer. So he's a very powerful fellow. But in addition, this Chancellor sits on the War Council. Now, this is during World War I. The battle on the continent is being fought fiercely, and all or any military operations that take place on the continent have to pass through the War Council. So this man is very, very important. And it's very threatening that he is being blackmailed. At first, the blackmail consists of him paying large sums of money, like $5,000 per photograph. And I'll get to the photographs in just a moment.
Yes.
You have to remember, this is World War I England, where the average salary was maybe £100 to £200 a year. And he's being asked to come up with £5,000. Now, what are these photographs which cause him to pay this huge amount of money? Well, they show his granddaughter in a romantic encounter with a man other than the aristocrat she's engaged to marry.
Mm.
Of course, it could cause a great scandal if they were released. And I guess more importantly, one has to wonder, could the beholder of these photographs eventually blackmail the Chancellor into giving up war secrets? So it's a very dicey situation. He can't go to Scotland Yard because at this time, Scotland Yard is full of news media leaks. And if he did go to Scotland Yard, the news would be out in a matter of a day or two. So he goes to see Sherlock Holmes and the Watsons, that is, the daughter of Sherlock Holmes and the Watsons, in an effort to procure those photographs and bring the blackmailer to justice. And that is the essence of the novel.
Interesting indeed, Mr. Leonard. So, how does Joanna Holmes' approach to the case differ from traditional investigative methods of the time?
Well, she's a very clever detective, having inherited these wonderful skills from her father. And she can make a great deal out of remarkably little. Trivial clues that others overlook become of major importance to her. And let me give you an example that occurs in this novel. When the Chancellor of the Exchequer comes to Baker Street, which is where the daughter and the Watsons live, he shows them a photograph. And this photograph again shows the granddaughter in a romantic embrace with this fellow who is not the man she's engaged to. Now, there's not much to see on that photograph. It shows a couple in embrace. It shows them in a featureless room. They seem to be sitting on a mat of some sort.
Interesting.
Back to the photograph is the sum to be paid of £5,000 and the place to where the money is to be located. And it's no handwriting. It's in block letters, so you can't trace any handwriting here. So
no tracing.
Yeah, no tracing. So how does she go about finding out or tracking down this blackmailer? Well, there are two rather curious findings in the photograph, which I will describe for you.
Go ahead, Mr. Leonard.
One is that the man who she's embracing is wearing what appears to be a silk shirt with a ruffled collar and puffed out sleeves. And in Joanna's mind, this automatically brings to mind, is this fellow a Shakespearean actor?
Is that a spoiler?
And then there's a second clue, which is even more dicey. Next to the man on the mat is an unusual pipe. It's colored white. It's got a bowl at one end, but it's got a stem. It's like 3 feet long. Now, what kind of pipe is that? Think about it. You see pipes, the stem is usually a matter of 4 or 5 inches, but this is 2 to 3 feet long, and it's white. Well, she's very knowledgeable in this sort of thing, and she knows that that's the sort of pipe that's used in opium dens.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason it has such a long stem is that you put the opium in the bowl.
Yes.
Then the pipe is held over a hot lamp, which ignites the opium. The vapor then comes up and is inhaled by the holder of the pipe. Now, the holder, he's about 3 feet, 4 feet away from the lamp. He doesn't want to be close to a hot lamp, and he's reclining. So that 3-foot stem allows him to recline, relax, and enjoy the vapors coming from the ignited opium. So automatically, the daughter says, I see where she is involved with a Shakespearean actor, and he may be addicted to opium because they're in an opium parlor. Now, you have to realize that if you go to an opium parlor, they don't give you a white pipe. They give you just literally a brown tube. If you see a white pipe that's probably made of ivory, that cost at least £25, which means he brought that pipe. He brought it to the den. So what she's looking for is a Shakespearean actor who frequents opium dens. And that's how she begins the investigation to track down the blackmailer.
Wow. Interesting indeed, Mr. Leonard. And what role does the setting of 221B Baker Street play in the development of the story?
Well, 221B Baker Street is the famous home of Sherlock Holmes. If you read any of the Sherlock Holmes novels, it was at 221B Baker Street where Sherlock and his good friend and colleague, Dr. Watson, shared rooms. So everything about the Holmes family revolves around Bakersfield. And the fact that you can bring in the Baker Street address, it's interesting because it allows you to bring in other factors, other people who were involved with the Sherlock Holmes mysteries. For example, in the Sherlock Holmes adventures, 221B Baker Street is owned by Mrs. Hudson.
Oh,
She
wow.
looks after the Holmes and Watson, but she owns the home. Well, a generation has passed, so Mrs. Hudson has passed on. So who I have there now is Miss Hudson's daughter, who inherited 221B Baker Street. And of course, Sherlock Holmes is now long gone. Watson is still alive. But living at 221B Baker Street is Dr. Watson, Joanna Holmes, and her husband, who happens to be the son of Dr. Watson.
Interesting.
So I brought all of the past into the present.
So, Mr. Leonard, let's talk about the characters and relationships. In what ways does Joanna embody traits of her father, Sherlock, and how does she forge her own identity?
Well, initially, she's a young woman, and remember, this is during the Edwardian era, where most young women from the higher levels of society either marry or become a governess. It would be unheard of for her to become a detective. Unheard of. She has such a keen mind, she becomes a nurse. And she's able to use that keen mind in nursing to solve problems, to make diagnoses, and what have you. So she is able, if you will, to use that mind in a deductive and reasoning fashion. And this holds true for her entrance into the field of investigation. Now, would you be interested in finding out how Sherlock Holmes came to have a daughter?
Certainly.
Well, as you may know, Sherlock Holmes was a rather cold-hearted individual. He rarely showed any emotion, and he never, in all of his adventures, was attracted to or involved with a woman. His colleague, John Watson, said the reason for this is that Sherlock didn't want any emotion to interfere with his finely tuned brain. So he stayed away from emotions and love. Just his world was solving crime. Well, that's fine, except back to the third adventure of Sherlock Holmes, there's an interesting story called The Scandal in Bohemia, in which there's a knock on the door at 221B Baker Street, and enters the king of Bohemia, who comes with a very delicate problem. He's now engaged to the daughter of the king of Scandinavia, and a June wedding is planned. But there's a problem, because months earlier he was involved with an adventuress, an opera star, Irene Adler, and she has pictures of them together, which are very indiscreet, very alarming, very sexual. And she believes that unless he comes back to her, she'll release those photos, which of course will ruin the king. So the king comes to Sherlock Holmes to find those pictures, get them back, whatever it takes. Well, Sherlock tries his best, but she outwits him. Irene Adler outwits Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes has been outwitted by 4 men, only 1 woman, Irene Adler. And at the end of that story, Holmes has to admit he failed. She bested him. That's where Arthur Conan Doyle ends the story. But I pick it up, because shortly thereafter, Irene Adler falls in love with a British attorney, Godfrey Norton, and they move to Paris to live a life of ecstasy and romance. But it turns out terrible for Irene, because her husband is a scoundrel, a no-good. He's just incredibly mean and nasty, things that she never imagined he would be. And he has a string of mistresses. The only time he comes home is when he needs money. So the worst part of him, however, is that he's a dullard. He's boring. Can't even carry on a decent conversation. So here I have this very bright woman, Irene Adler, who's saddled with a boring drunk. It's a miserable marriage. One night, there's another knock on the door at 221B Baker Street. Holmes answers it. Watson is now married, moved out, and it's Irene Adler. And she tells Holmes, I'm married to a bore, a drunkard, a dullard. I need conversation. I need stimulation, and I think you can provide it. Well, Holmes invites her in. Now, this is wonderful. They have a great evening discussing crime, solving cases, inventing new puzzles, and along the way they drink glass after glass of brandy and inject one another with cocaine, and they end up in bed together. The next morning, when Holmes awakens, Irene Adler's gone. That doesn't bother him. He's happy. He doesn't want any involvement with her. Good, let her go. I can get back to my crime-solving dilemmas, which are now facing me. So life goes on.
Yes, go ahead.
8.5 months later, there's another knock on the door at 221 Street, and it's Irene Adler, who's 8.5 months pregnant.
Oh, wow.
But unfortunately, she's very ill. She's suffering from the toxemia pregnancy. Her blood pressure is sky high. Her kidneys are failing. She'll be dead in a matter of weeks. She comes to Holmes for assistance. Help me. What can you do? Well, Holmes is not going to be a father. You can forget that. And he has no interest in the child. That's just his makeup. But to Holmes, it's a problem that needs to be solved. So he goes about solving it. And he does the following. He calls up his friend, Dr. Watson. They arrange for Irene Adler to be admitted to hospital when she goes into labor. The child will be delivered and immediately put up for adoption.
Oh, wow.
The adoption papers will be sealed. So no one will ever know, other than Sherlock Holmes and Watson, who the father really was.
So,
Now,
yes, go ahead. Go ahead, Mr.
Let me
Leonard.
just finish it with the following.
Yes.
Joanna gets married, marries a distinguished surgeon, as happy as can be. But unfortunately, disaster strikes because her husband is afflicted with cholera and dies.
Oh, my goodness.
So here she is, a young woman with a baby boy that she has to raise. This is the sadness of life. She's living in the mansion of her dead husband's father, Lord Blaylock, so she has all the privileges of life, but she's still very sad. Well, 10 years later, she's walking down the street, and Curzon Street in London, and a man falls 3 stories to his death and lands right in front of Joanna and her son. It's a gruesome scene. It doesn't bother Joanna. She used to be a nurse. She's accustomed to this. She goes home. Well, the man who fell to his death is named Charles Harrelson, and his sister goes to see John Watson, who's still living at 221B Baker Street, by the way, and asks for his assistance. She tells him, this is, my brother didn't commit suicide. He was a soldier, a gallant soldier, decorated. He was the head of the family. He would never do this. Never, never. Well, Watson's not terribly interested. But then she says, the sister says, but there are 2 versions of what happened. One is given by a gardener half a block away, and another version is given by Joanna Blaylock. Well, Watson almost jumps out of his chair because he knows Joanna Blaylock is the daughter of Sherlock Holmes. And he agrees to take the case. Well, the next day, he and his son go around to visit Joanna. And after introduction, Watson says, we are here to investigate the death of Charles Harrelson. And Joanna smiles humorously and said, no, Dr. Watson, you're here to investigate the murder of Charles Harrelson. She knows. She saw clues in that fall. She knows it's murder. And that's the beginning of Joanna Blaylock as a detective and her association with the Watsons. So now you know the whole story.
Bravo, Mr. Leonard. Bravo. Thank you so much for sharing your talents to the world. So can you please invite our listeners to support your new novel, A Scandalous Affair? Yes, people, let's support Mr. Leonard Goldberg, US Today best-selling author, because if you support him, more scandalous novels to come. So, Mr. Leonard, thank you for your time. Bodycount people, see you soon.